Warning, incoming game over. Warning, incoming game over.
Welcome in to Game Over Toronto following a emphatic Leafs win that was desperately needed against a Flames team that seems more and more to be on the outs in the playoff picture. Welcome into a crossover edition of Game Over. My name is Zach Payne. I'm representing the Toronto side of things. I'm joined by my good buddy Matt DeMille representing Calgary in this. And Matt, how are Flames fans feeling after that game?
Oh man, it feels like it's going to be two ends of the story in the sense of the Flames fans wanting to embrace the tank and get that high draft pick are absolutely on cloud nine after a performance like that. And then on the side of the story is the Flames fans that have that intention and hope of making the playoffs. And of course, they went home tonight incredibly frustrated and disappointed from that perspective. I don't think it is two sides of the coin. I don't think there's a middle perspective following tonight. And I will say myself, I'm ready to embrace the tank following tonight's game because really there wasn't much upside besides the opportunity of maybe picking higher than we expected from weeks prior.
And on the contrary, Leafs fans are definitely feeling a lot more united in this one after weeks of frustration, weeks of poor play by the Leafs, and just failing to live up to the potential based on how good the roster is on paper. But tonight, maybe a bounce back game, maybe a get right game. We'll see. They've got the Avalanche coming up on Wednesday. That'll be a lot more realistic of a test, but definitely a nice break in all of the drama over the last few weeks. The sky will not be falling for at least a couple days here. So, welcome into the program. Make sure to hit like and subscribe to Game Over Toronto. Make sure you go subscribe to Game Over Calgary as well as we get into it. Now, the way I always structure these shows for anyone that is new to the program, I usually start this first segment off just a simple game recap. Now, that is going to be a little different in this one in the sense that this game got out of hand in the second period, but it wasn't that it's not that the game was necessarily even in the first period, but Calgary was at least staying close thanks to one Dustin Wolf in the first period. Now, again, Wolf gets pulled for the first time in his career. He gives up 5+ goals for just the fourth time in his career, second time to the Leafs. But in that first period, just in the first, what did you see from Dustin Wolf that, in terms of keeping Calgary in these games, that he's been able to do all year?
Well, I think it's honestly what we've been seeing for 95% of the season so far with him. And you nailed it right on the head. It's his ability to keep a, really not that skilled, not that talented Flames team in the fight. And we've seen in games prior that he's had this ability to do this for a full 60. And of course, tonight wasn't the case. But through the first 20, it really seemed like it was going to be another night where Dustin Wolf has and gives the Flames the opportunity to pick up a point, if not two. And that is really the direction it was headed with a couple of saves he made through that first period that as a rookie goaltender, you don't see saves like that being made. And of course, we do call him a rookie, but this at this point in the season, at this juncture, I really don't know if you can call him a rookie like when you really examine how well he's been playing as of late. And again, it's nothing different. And for everybody out east and all the Leafs fans who only see Dustin Wolf twice a year, that first period is what the Flames fans have had to enjoy throughout the course of 60 plus games. And of course, as you said, Zach, this marked the first time in his career that he got pulled in a game. And this actually marked the first time all season where the Flames holds their starting goaltender, whether it is Dan Vladar or Dustin Wolf. So it is also something where you have to give this team props. At the 65 game mark, both goaltenders have played well enough to keep this team in the fight in every game. And of course, I don't even necessarily want to put this game on Wolf's shoulders. Every goalie is kind of bound to have a rough stint here and there. And of course, letting in 5+ goals tonight is not, or five tonight isn't something he's going home happy about. But this isn't a game where you go, oh, this is goaltending's fault that the Flames were put in this position. It was honestly quite the opposite.
Yeah, and as you said, like this is not on Dustin Wolf. I know he gets yanked, but it was more of a mercy pulling by the Flames coaching staff to be like, you know what? You don't have to deal with this anymore. You're free. You can rest for the rest of the night. And the Flames, I mean, maybe Wolf ends up playing tomorrow night. We don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. But just kind of backtracking a little bit. So the Leafs, they actually start relatively fast for the first time in a while. They get on the board early thanks to a Max Domi slap shot, which is not a sentence I thought I would ever say. That's Domi's sixth goal of the year. He's had a couple in recent memory, but he is a very streaky player. Tonight, he happened to have one of his better games. He also had a very nice assist later in the second period, but early on in the first, honestly, the first 15 to 20 minutes kind of just the first period set the tone for the game. The Flames seemed to just be a step behind all night. And I don't like, do the Flames have a forechecking problem? Like, why is it that the Flames have been so unable to establish possession in the offensive zone?
Well, I think it just comes down to the guys they have in their forward core. You think of like the headliners of this forward team is the Hubertos of the world, the Kadris of the world, but besides those guys who in 25 teams across the league, they're not first liners. The other,
Mhm.
6, 7, it's up to debate, but they're so reliant on putting that kind of combination and the best forwards they have out there to establish a sense of pressure and dominance, and that's something that they haven't been able to do all season. Again, for the folks out east that don't see the Flames very often, this is a very flamesy team and a very flamesy performance in the sense that there really is no offensive pressure that's established. It's really just kind of making the most of these fast breaks and quick break-ins to the zone. But this issue has been something that started since game one and is going to go right till game 82, is just they don't have the talent to establish a presence offensively. And I harp back in all these previous streams that I've been a part of is that this team is so poorly equipped to establish presence that they are a really well teached like perimeter team, that they only play from the perimeter, and that's where their scoring chances are coming from. So again, not a new story in that sense tonight either.
Yeah, and you look at the one goal that the Flames scored that counted, it's off the rush, right? It's a great pass to Rasmus Anderson, who just beats Wool clean from the top of the slot there with a sprawling Simone Benoit doing something on the play. Probably a goal that Wool would want to have back, but this game was very nearly, well, sorry, that's getting ahead. So the Leafs, after a 1-1 after the first period, the Leafs get an early power play in the second, and their power play since the turn of the new year in 2025, they've been very statistically good, but realistically it's been very hit or miss. Their top unit, which features five forwards, bit of a new thing for the NHL, has been very inconsistent, and especially against good teams, it hasn't been very timely in when it produces goals. In this one, against a rough Calgary team, they obviously strike multiple times, which is going to feel good, and hopefully they could get some momentum going. But William Nylander just blasts one over the shoulder of Dustin Wolf, which, what are you going to do? Sometimes a good player is going to score. Nylander is second in the league in goals for a reason. He has been absolutely lethal this year. Then the Flames go back to the power play, and it seems like they tie the game. It gets called back due to an offside, but just in watching the Flames power play throughout this game, that goal definitely that got called back definitely seemed like more of an exception than the rule. What do you make of just the Flames power play in this game and in the larger context of the season?
Oh goodness, you're hitting me with all the hard-hitting questions that I've been preaching for this entire season. I mean, I'll keep it short and sweet. I mean, the Flames sit at a 21.7 power play percent, and that's good enough to be kind of right in the middle of the pack at 18%. And if I could kind of summarize this team's power play, is just very hot and cold. There's games, and I'm going to give Jonathan Huberdeau credit. I've been giving him credit for most of the season. I think he's having quite a bounce back year from what we've seen in the previous two he's been in Calgary. When he's clicking and when him and Nazem Kadri's kind of chemistry is really going, they do have this really good sense on the power play of putting pucks in the back of the net. Again, that's a lot of that comes from their ability to kind of get those quick breaks into the offensive zone. It's not really the established pressure that we saw in against Toronto today and what Toronto is capable of doing as well. You mentioned Toronto having this 5 forward setup, and I don't think that's something I've seen this season when I've watched the game. So when I watched that, I was just shocked, amazed, and surprised at just the strategy that is being done by Toronto and how well it works when you have the star power to do it versus Calgary on the other hand. I couldn't name 5 forwards I would want on the power play, let alone 5 forwards I would want on the first power play unit. So again, I think this kind of goes back to the lack of star power we see offensively with the Flames. There's only so much that a Jonathan Huberdeau and Nazem Kadri combination can do, but besides that, it's really just mixing and matching in the moment to see what kind of chemistry they can produce, and that's just a recipe for disaster, if you ask me.
Well, it's funny you mentioned just how unique the Leafs power play is and what you could do with good star power, because if you look at the Leafs power play run by old friend of the Flames, Mark Savard, this is what it like. I will say I've been very critical of Savard's work this season because the Leafs often, when they don't score, it's because they don't have a plan. They get too stuck in it's like the analysis paralysis problem. But coming over from Calgary, you look at their power play over the past few years, and it has been a talent issue. There has not been the right talent to produce a legitimately good power play unit. In Toronto, that obviously kind of natural. Like, you have the talent at your disposal. You just have to make it work when it matters. To be determined on that. The playoffs are still a few weeks away, or a month. I think it's a month away from today is the last game of the season for the Leafs. So we'll see what happens there. But so the Flames have that goal called back. And that seemed to be the end of the game. Like, Calgary stopped playing after that. Nick Robertson gets on the board to make it 3-1 on a play where Max Domi beats out an icing, and the Flames stop playing. Just inexcusably stop playing, and Domi's able to hit Robertson, who just goes to the front of the net, gets a one-timer. Nothing Wolf can do, a pass from behind the net and passes from behind the net have a higher shooting percentage off of them for exactly the reason that you saw, because Wolf has to... he doesn't see where Robertson is, and he has to react super quickly. Just not any position you want to put your rookie goaltender in. So terrible from the Flames on that play. And then Matthews doubles down on the power play. And as Matthew in the chat said, Matthews actually hits the net and he scores. And this has been a problem, Austin Matthews not having at all an Austin Matthews type season. He scored goals 25 and 26 on the year, which is about as far as you can go from a 69 goal season the year before. But there's been a lot of speculation whether Matthews is healthy, the injuries, what's going on with him, why doesn't he look like himself? Now, Anthony Petrielli, Maple Leaf Hot Stove, put this pretty perfectly in the MLHS podcast, saying that if Austin Matthews is healthy enough to play 20 minutes a night and play on the top penalty kill unit, I don't want to hear about injuries as an excuse, because if he's hurt, why is he playing so much? Why is he playing in such prominent roles? If Matthews is healthy enough to be in these situations, you need him to be effective. In this game, he actually hits the net. He actually scores goals. The first one was hilarious because he kind of bobbled the puck and then just turned and fired it top shelf anyways. That is, I guess, the drawback of Dustin Wolf is he is still a smaller goalie, so elite shooters do have a little bit more room to snipe on him when they have time and space. But then a few moments later, Matthews ends up in the slot, different role in the power play, gets a one-timer goal. That is the Austin Matthews that Leaf fans have been waiting to see. A 3-point night, all 3 points coming on the power play, and I have never been happier to be involved in such blatant power play merchantry. But end of the day, the Leafs take a 5-1 lead, and this is the point where you go into the third period, you're up 5-1. Normally, when the Leafs have a multi-goal lead, this is where they completely just crawl into their shell. They basically stop playing in the third period, and the other team is able to get a couple goals, make the game a lot closer than it ought to be. That didn't happen here. After a weird Rasmus Anderson penalty, everyone stopped playing again, and the Leafs went down, and Bobby McMahon, he gets a slump buster, very weak goal for Dan Vladar to give up on his first shot of the game, and the Leafs go up 6-1. Flames get one on the board at the end of the game thanks to Scott Lawton putting it in his own net. But in the third period, the Flames just died. They just stopped playing. And it kind of is symbolic of the game as a whole. The Flames just did not look interested in playing hockey tonight.
It's frustrating. It's that two sides of the coin between being frustrated about, the Flames playoff hopes are slowly being squandered with performances like this. And again, the other side of the coin of, let's tank, let's drop the standings a little bit and save our first round pick. But you nailed it on the head, right? This is a game that, with the Flames very much in the playoff race, this is a game that the Flames need to come in and prove that, while we may or may not be able to pick up the 2 points, show that we can compete against a playoff contending team. Would you even call it a Stanley Cup contending team, as we've tagged the Leafs with the last couple of years? But
Oh.
that's exactly my point, in the sense of, with this team being so tight in such a tight playoff race, the effort has to be there on a nightly basis. And tonight, right from the gates, it just felt something was off. And I really think, the Flames are starting. This is the first of 4 Eastern Conference games they play. They've got the Rangers tomorrow night, followed by a game against the Islanders and the Devils. I really do think that this is going to be that breaking point for the Flames as to which direction they are really going to dive in when they get back home, whether it is the tank, embracing the tank, or going for the a playoff spot. And again, that third period really just sends a message of, we're down in this game, but you're not down in the playoff series. There's a chance to, show some emotion, fight back. And they just, like you said, rolled over and died. And I know we were talking privately before the game, and you mentioned that this is a really big game for the Leafs to have a bounce back. They've been struggling. They haven't necessarily been the brightest, most energetic bunch of late. And I told you, I'm like, the Flames are the perfect team to have a bounce back, because they are due for games like this when we do have a heightened sense of pressure on them to perform at some way, and they just roll over. And this is really what I've, again, been harping on all season, where this is the team that makes me believe that we are not a playoff contending team, and we don't deserve to be in the playoffs because of games like this.
Yeah, and as Matt C puts in the chat, when the Flames hit the ice against real top end talent, they look like an AHL team. I can't
Yeah.
say I've watched a lot of Flames hockey this season. Like obviously I've watched the 2 games against Toronto. I probably have watched maybe half a dozen games outside of that, and the Flames just seem like one of those mediocre teams, and kind of similar to the Flames teams of most of the 2010s, where yeah, they have talent, but they're always just kind of mediocre. They're always kind of in the playoff race. They're around it. Some years they make it, most years they don't, and they just never bottom out. And with that said, do you think that we are finally at a point where the Flames could actually potentially bottom out for once?
I think, based on this roster and what we have, and even assets, I do think this is the first time in what feels like a while that there is the possibility of being this bottom feeding team. And of course, eh, the message for this season is the same message that has been preached through the 2010s of retool, not rebuild. And I think with moves of acquiring the likes of Joel Farabee and Morgan Frost really strike home the fact that the Flames still are in this retooled, not full on rebuild. But again, the other side of the argument is, if we were in a retool, we would have kept guys around like the Noah Hannafins of the world type thing, right? Where they still have they're still relatively young, they still have some upside. And by shelling off those guys for the picks that we've been looking for, the prospects that we've been looking for, really does that is the first time in a while that I've really seen a big shift into becoming this rebuilding team. But then again, as I said, you pick up the Frost of the world, the Farabees, that seem like they're trying to speed up the process of a rebuild. And again, I don't know if there's necessarily good examples of teams that find success that try and, you know, speed up what is a rebuild. However, asset wise, and what the Flames have within the next couple of years, as well as the prospects that we currently have, I do think there is the start of what can be a really strong foundation if the rebuild is embraced. And again, I think the offseason is really going to, now that the trade deadline is done and we didn't really see many major moves from the Flames, I think the offseason is really where you see where Craig Conroy's stance is, whether the rebuild and retool. And again, that's totally up for decision and stuff that we're not going to see until the summer.
Yeah. So, with all that being said, do you have any last thoughts on this game specifically before we move on?
I think it's probably the same mentality that the Flames have tonight, where it's like, let's just turn the page on that one. That's not one. I think all 20 guys on that team know, what went wrong for them, what needs to be done better, and I don't think even Ryan Huska in that room, it really feels like this isn't a game where he's needs to be, dropping 15 F-bombs and cussing the players out. I also don't think that's Ryan Huska's coaching dynamic and his approach with these players. But this really feels like a game where it's, hey, we know exactly what we did wrong. This was arguably one of the worst performances. This is the game where we need to just turn the page, forget that this even happened, especially with such a tight turnaround against New York tomorrow night. This isn't something that can linger and sleep on. And I think I'll take the same mentality of tonight's show as well.
Yeah. Yeah, fair enough. We're not quite in, was it Bob Hartley throwing the stick into the stands at practice mode? We're not there yet. So,
No,
with that
not
being
at all.
said, we'll turn this over to our second period here. And as we do, just a reminder to hit like and subscribe to Game Over Toronto and Game Over Calgary. If you're on a podcasting platform, make sure you drop a follow as well. And of course, make sure to check out all of the Game Over Network channels, one for every Canadian market. And you can also check out our merch over at thegameovernetwork.com. We have hoodies, shirts, hats, mugs for all of the Canadian markets as well. Again, that's at thegameovernetwork.com. So, in this second segment, as this is a crossover show, I know we did spend a little bit more time on Calgary here, but we'll focus more on Toronto in the third segment. In this second segment, this is going to be simple. He got pulled in this game, and his two worst games of the season, arguably, have been against Toronto, ironically enough. But Dustin Wolf has been a revelation for the Flames this season, and he has been everything that every Flames fan has hoped that he would be since he's dominated the AHL for years. So we're going to go long first. We're going to get into the specifics of this, and then at the end of the segment, I'll have you give a briefer version for the people that may not see the full show. But Dustin Wolf, why does he deserve the Calder?
Oh, I mean, I think it's pretty simple. I think, while there are a lot of great Calder, guys in contention, the Macklin Celebrinis of the world, the Lane Hudsons of the world that are having great seasons, I think a big argument for Dustin Wolf and what he's doing this year is not only the numbers that he's doing, which again, he's topping the charts among all rookies in wins with 22, save percentage with a .914, and all of these are prior to tonight. I'm sure all of that took a hit following tonight's game, but heading into this game, leads all NHL rookie goaltenders in wins, save percentage, saves, as well as he's tied for shutouts with 3. But again, while stats tell one story, I think you also have to consider the longer and the bigger impact that his performance is doing. And that is, simply put, he's putting a team like Calgary, who is a bottom-feeding team in every facet of the game except the goaltending department, and he's turned them into a team deep in a playoff hunt with 20 games left to go. I know at the start of the season, as much as there was this really strong emphasis that Dustin Wolf needs to come in and he needs to start, I don't think anybody expected him to put out a performance of this stature through 60 games. I know myself, I kind of wanted to see like a split start between him and Vladar, where it's like, hey, let's not give the rookie too many reps and tire him out. And he's forced the Flames' hand in the sense of every single night he is putting the Flames in the best position to win. And he's done this incredible job at being 23, 24 years old, that he has this talent at winning the Flames games. And we haven't seen that in a goaltender since, I would say, Mika Kiprasov, this knack and this talent too. In his talent alone and what he does in the crease, he is capable of winning games for the Flames. It's not something we've seen anything before, and it's really kind of the story of what we see in past rookie goaltenders that have won the Calder in the past. It's the same kind of story. The most recent is Steve Mason in 2008, 2009. He came in as a rookie for Columbus, and correct me if I'm wrong, and if I did the math right, 33 wins, 10 shutouts, and he single-handedly put the Columbus Blue Jackets in their first ever playoff series. And again, that is an incredible accomplishment. And I'm not saying Dustin Wolf is going to put up the stats he did, but again, it's the broader story that he's been able to do and what he's been able to do for this Flames team is really something you have to consider. And again, the Macklin Celebrinis, who had 50 points in 56 games against a bottom-feeding Shark team. I'm not trying to knock him because his performance is also, he's having quite a performance, but this isn't something we see in goaltenders very often. And I think that's what gives him a little bit more leverage over guys like Celebrini, who are incredibly talented, guys like Hudson that are incredibly talented. But their story we've kind of seen before, haven't we? Versus this is something the first time in maybe 15 years that we're seeing in a guy like Dustin Wolf. And again, I don't want to get too rambling here. I know this is your show, Zach, but you also have to, you mentioned his time in the AHL and what he's been able to do. He's a player of the year, a goaltender of the year. But even before the AHL, his time in the Western Hockey League in Everett, he won just about every award he could win as a goaltender in that league. And it seems like if the track record shows, in every league he establishes himself in, he finds success, whether it's individual or team based. And that's just something you can't really omit when you compare him to the other guys that are in contention for this award.
Yeah, and the other factor too, you say that we haven't really seen a goaltender do this in a decade and a half, right? The other thing we haven't really seen is a goaltender that looks like Dustin Wolf. And what I mean by that is Dustin Wolf is, if physically, when you look at him, he is the antithesis of what a traditional goalie looks like. He's not tall at all. He's tiny. He's short. He's not very big at all. Like, he is super skinny, super short, and every logical, any piece of logical thinking over what makes a goaltender a great goaltender is their ability to take up a lot of the net. And also the athletic component, which is where Wolf makes up for a lot of those deficiencies. And on the broadcast, they talked about the fact that Wolf's favorite goalie growing up was Jonathan Quick. And when I hear that, I think two things. One is, man, are we old if goalies are growing up watching guys that we've been watching for 10 plus years and that are still in the league, right? But the other is, that makes so much sense, because when you watch Dustin Wolf play, he looks exactly like prime Jonathan Quick, where he is almost always just sliding around as low to the ice as he can possibly be, the true definition of a butterfly goalie. When you watch him play, what are the things that he does differently from a Dan Vladar, for example, a more traditional goalie, that allows him to make up for his size deficiency?
I think you said it best. Like, it's really the athleticism. For such a small frame, he is so talented at being able to move in such he makes things like, he makes difficult saves look easy. And like, the stuff I've seen him do, he kind of just like shrugs it off like it's an everyday kind of maneuver for him. But again, you mentioned like his small stature really does help him elevate that kind of the sense of athleticism and mobility that you don't see in normal goaltenders, that instead of them just having to kind of crab walk left and right and just take up a big frame. And I think that really also comes down to like the training component of it, and like just the moves he makes is so seamless, and something that it looks like he's been doing for years. I mean, I'm not a goalie guy. I can't break down exactly, what exactly works well in terms of his stance and his positioning and stuff, but he looks like he's the type of guy that he looks like, since a young age he's known that he isn't the biggest goaltender in the league, so he kind of embraced that and created his own kind of style and his own form and his own, just the way he moves in the crease based off his size and the advantages that a smaller size goaltender brings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so Luke in the chat saying the big difference between Celebrini, Hudson, and Wolf is that Wolf had to be the guy for the Flames, and he is. Nobody expects a skater to steal a game, at least not as often compared to a goalie. And that's going to lead me into my final question on Dustin Wolf Corner, because at this point, Calgary has become the Flying Dustin Wolves. We don't have ballots, obviously, we're not big time like that. But if you had a heart ballot, does Dustin Wolf end up on it? And if so, what spot are you putting him in?
I hate to say it. As much as I love him and he's having such a strong season, I can't say I can necessarily put him in the Hart ballot when you compare him to what other guys in this league are doing, right? I think when it comes to goaltending, I think the one guy that does deserve a Hart ballot is Connor Hellebuck, right?
Mm-hmm.
What he's doing in Winnipeg, and of course he's playing on an elite team in Winnipeg, and that does help in some way or form. But even with how good Winnipeg is, he is still the man in that crease. We've seen stories and we've seen past seasons, the cough Edmonton Oilers of the world, where they have they have a relatively decent goaltender, but his numbers aren't anything spectacular because you have just this unwavering force called Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid that can outscore just about any problem you have. Winnipeg has shown, at times this season, they have lapses in their game. They have nights where the offense takes a backseat, their defense takes a backseat, and Connor Hellebuck is the man that is producing doing what Dustin Wolf is doing and winning games for you. So I really think, as much as I do want to give him a vote in the Hart, I just think even in terms of goaltenders, he's not the best goaltender in the league. And this season speaking, right? And then again, you have your Alex Ovechkins of the world that are 8 goals away of breaking the all-time goal scoring record, right? You have Leon Draisaitl, who is unstoppable this year. So as much as I love Dustin Wolf and as much as I've been caught, for lack of a better word, glazing him at parts of this season, I really do have to think in the long term and what other players are doing in this league. And there are obviously guys that are more deserving of the Hart. I mean, I think a different conversation is potentially the Vezina, in the sense of like you're not necessarily having to compete with players, it's just goaltenders. Yeah. But again, at this point of the season, I think Calder is definitely contention and arguably a favorite, but I think you have to think logically as well. And I could see maybe votes going, a third place vote, maybe going to Wolf. And I'm reading the chat as well, Luke. I don't necessarily hate Dustin Wolf, but I do think logically from time to time, and that is coming from a Flames fan, and he's really been the only kind of bright note of this team this season.
Yeah, and that's totally fair. I will say, if the Flames did go, like, if Wolf just blacks out the rest of the season and the Flames make the playoffs, it would be pretty hard for me to accept a justification for Wolf not being at least top 5 in voting on the Vezina and Hart. For like, I couldn't name 5 goalies having a better season than Wolf right now, and I would like I judge the Hart a little bit differently than the voters do, because the voters, who was the best player in the NHL this season, whereas the definition of an MVP award is supposed to be who was the most valuable to their team, and Dustin Wolf is absolutely the most valuable player to his team compared to a lot of players in the NHL. So I would probably have him top 5 for that reason, but I understand that most traditional voters probably wouldn't. But with that being said, go ahead.
No, I'll keep it short. But I mean, I guess I am that traditional voter in the sense of, I think of it, not only storyline, because that is a big component and the bigger message behind the stats, but I do think stats go a certain way, and especially in the Hart, I think there is a certain point where stats do trump, stories and impact. Again, I do agree. If the Flames, if Wolf goes on this legendary run where he, wins 80% of the starts he has, I think we might have a different conversation. But just as it stands right now, and the traditional voter in me, I just do think it, as much as I would like to see him on the ballot and get the votes, I do think it's difficult to argue him being, a favorite for either one of those trophies. The Vezina more than the Hart, of course. But yeah.
Yeah, and so you know what? As we switch over to Leafs Corner now, everyone in the chat list the amount of goalies in the league that you think are better than Dustin Wolf right now, because I bet you it's not a long list for a lot of people. So, with that being said, we're going to turn it over to our third segment. This is going to be more Leafy, so all the Leafs fans that have been maybe disgruntled at us talking so much Flames, this is the time for you. Of course, make sure to like and subscribe to Game Over Toronto. Follow us on podcasting platforms. Go subscribe to Game Over Calgary as well. So, this third segment, the Leafs have desperately needed a night like this. Since this is their first regulation win in like 9 games, going back to it's their first regulation win in March. It's been since February 27th or something against in New York, a game they did not deserve to win at all. And since then, the Leafs only other win was a shootout win against Utah in a game they blew a 3-0 lead and were dominating the first half of that game, then got their teeth kicked in the second half of that game and were lucky to get to the shootout. So this was very needed. Coming off of games where the Leafs have struggled to score, that's been a big narrative. The Leafs have really struggled to put the puck in the back of the net. They've really struggled to generate 5-on-5 offense. This is exactly the type of night they needed, where the special teams took over. They were generating like crazy at 5-on-5. The forecheck looked great. The defense looked great. Pretty much every aspect of the Leafs looked great. So, Matt, I want to ask you, as an outsider that doesn't really watch the Leafs, what do you see when you see this version of the Leafs? This season, this Leafs team, what is your kind of take on where they are right now?
Yeah, I mean, like I will say my sample size is tonight's game. I can't say I've seen the Leafs past tonight. That being said, what I saw tonight is a team that is offensively sound in the sense that it seems just about any kind of play in any kind of position, they will generate a high danger scoring chance. And it's something that makes me incredibly envious getting to watch. You mentioned at the first segment of tonight's show, Austin Matthews' first goal, where he kind of just bobbles it and is like, screw it, I'm just going to fire it on net. Like that is the type of stuff that the Flames are not privy to have. That guy that just has this knack and this talent to have this lethal shot that can find the back of the net at just about any angle. So it really, I've saw myself like in awe of what this team is is able to do offensively, and something that, as I said, it makes me a little jealous as a Flames fan. I do know that story hasn't been the case for parts of this season for you guys. However, tonight in the sample size I have, it looks like a pretty darn dangerous team, at least offensively.
Well, and that's how it should be, right? This is how they should be. They should be able to generate chances at will. But coming into this game, the Leafs had been the Leafs are a low event team. Under Craig Berube, they've been a very low event team. They don't give up much. They don't generate much. And in the previous 7 or 8 games since their last regulation win, and since their last legitimately good win against Chicago, the Leafs on the season are a little below the middle of the pack, and they generate about 10 high danger chances per game. In the previous 8 games or so, they were generating just under 8. It was like 7.8, which was by far last in the league. Their offense had completely died. I assume they are back to, they probably got 11 or 12 tonight because they just were outworking the Flames in every aspect. So it is like, and Matthew in the chat saying, I'm not letting tonight fool me. We'll need to see games like this for the rest of the season. That's exactly how Leafs fans probably feel, and they're justified in feeling that, because this is the potential. We've now seen the potential. This is what this team can look like. They just have to do it consistently, and more importantly, they have to do it against teams that are actually playing their best hockey. Because, look, we've said it a lot tonight, but this was probably the worst any team has looked against Toronto this season. Mostly because most teams in the NHL get up for a Toronto game. It's the Leafs. We got whatever. You want to get up for that game. You want to beat them. That wasn't there for Calgary tonight. So from that perspective, Need to see more against Colorado on Wednesday and New York on Thursday after that. The other thing is the Leafs, they went big game hunting at the trade deadline. They tried to get Mikko Rantanen. They offered pretty much all of their futures for him. Carolina wanted Matthew Nyes. The Leafs said no. Then the Carolina wanted Mitch Marner. Mitch Marner refused to waive his no-move clause. So Toronto instead pivoted. They sent a first and a third and Fraser Minton, or a big package to Boston for Brandon Carlo. That trade is awesome. I love Brandon Carlo. A few people have been ragging him a little bit, but he is just super solid defensive defenseman. Brad Treliving, for all his flaws, boy, does he know how to identify good right-handed defensemen. The other trade they made, Scott Laughton. They trade a first-round pick and Nikita Grabenkin, who now is Nikita Grabenkin, the best prospect in the world? No, but he was a fun prospect that projected to be a solid bottom six player. And as Matthew points out in the chat, a first in Grabenkin seems like a lot for a fourth-line center. Now, Scott Laughton, in the couple games that he's played in Toronto, he has had a rough adjustment period. He started off as the third-line center. That's what he was brought in to do. He was playing between Bobby McMahon and Max Domi. And he looked terrible. He just didn't look comfortable. There was zero offense. There was not a ton. Like, he just didn't have the puck at all. And his line got caved in a little bit. On Saturday, or it wasn't Saturday, it would have been Thursday against the Panthers last week. For a period, Craig Berube puts him on the wing, on the second line with Tavares and Nylander. And lo and behold, he looks a lot better. Crazy. It's almost like he's not actually a center. Then tonight, he is demoted to the fourth line. Now, granted, the fourth line looked fine, but you don't pay a first and a prospect for a fourth line center. I don't care how much of his cap hit was retained. So Matthew says, I would rather see Pontus on the fourth line and Yarncroke on the second line. If I had to wager a guess at what the playoff lineup is going to look like, because this team is incredibly stubborn, it'll be Nyes, Matthews, Marner, whatever. Marner and Matthews always falls apart in the playoffs, but well, maybe this year it'll be different. I think Scott Laughton is going to be the second line left winger with Tavares and Nylander. He's a bang and crash winger. He's good on the forecheck. He'll go to the net. He's responsible defensively. He is exactly the kind of guy you have to pair with Tavares and Nylander. And Nylander is going to have the puck 99% of the time when that line's on the ice anyways, so you don't need to rely on him to drive a line at all. Then the third line, I think, will be exactly what it was tonight. McMahon, Domi, Robertson, and you just, you grip the handlebars and you pray to the holiest of deities that they break even in a series, because that is a leaky third line. Fourth line, Lorentz, David Kampf, I think, needs to draw back in, and that's where you put Yarncroke. I don't think Holmberg should be in the playoff lineup. He's just not good enough. And you also need David Kampf for the penalty kill. That being said, having watched Scott Laughton in a few games, that is a hard sell. Going from Scott Laughton is so bad he needs to be on the fourth line to he should be the second line left winger is a hard sell. So now the Leafs are in this weird position where the second line left wing spot is a giant question mark. Whether or not you want to keep this version of the third line together is a giant question mark. So what do you do? That would be a great question to answer if Craig Berube would experiment. For the Flames fans that don't know, I'm at war with Craig Berube because I've been begging for new line combos all season. All season. Saturday, it finally gets announced. We're going to get new line combos. Max Domi is back up on the first line with Matthews. Marner is on the second line with Tavares. Nylander's on the third line. I was so happy. The Leafs, 2 periods later, immediately changed their mind, go back to the other line combos. And now the line combos obviously work tonight, so we're going to be stuck with that for the rest of the season. So Leaf fans, I'm sure that'll be frustrating to hear, but that's kind of the state of the union on the Leafs at this point, and we'll just have to wait and see what happens in the playoffs. So at this point, I'll turn it over to our fourth and final segment. At this point of the show, this is where we like to invite your questions, whether or not it's a Leafs question, Flames question, broader NHL question, whatever it may be. If you have questions for Matt and I, make sure you throw them down in the chat. This is going to be your last chance to do so. And of course, before we get into that, make sure to hit like and subscribe to Game Over Toronto. Go subscribe to Game Over Calgary as well. You can also follow the Game Over Network on social media at the Game Over Network. You can also follow Matt and I on social medias as well. You can find me at ZachPayne41 on Twitter. Matt, where can the people find you?
DeMille_Matthew on Twitter is where you can find me.
I don't know how active you're on Twitter, but
You know what? I'm not active on just about anything, but that's probably your best chance to see me occasionally retweet something is probably the most you'll get from me.
Hey.
If not, maybe the Game Over Network's Discord channel. I'm usually relatively active in that too. So yeah, I'm kind of a ghost on social media, but if you try hard enough, I will make sure I get back to you.
Yeah, and aside from that, if there's other ways you want to support the Game Over Network, you can also check out our Patreon. The link to that will be in the description. We have both free and paid tiers if you feel like supporting a network of young broadcasters in this ever-changing hockey landscape, or hockey broadcasting landscape. So make sure you go check that out as well. Now, Luke, in the chat, what was the bigger factor in this game? The Leafs showing up or the Flames disappearing? If I'm gonna, as from a Leafs perspective, I'm gonna say the Flames disappearing. For as much as I love the Leafs showing up in all aspects of the game, I think we know that the Leafs penalty kill having a good night is probably a bit of a facade. We definitely know the Leafs power play going 3 for 3 is a facade, and Calgary just looked terrible. I don't know. Do you see it any different, Matt?
Oh, that's such a great question, to be honest with you, because I can definitely see like two different answers from that. I will agree with you. I do think the biggest factor is the Flames disappearing. I think you nailed it on the head that like the expectations for the Leafs, like they can produce something like that. It was kind of only a matter of time until they really kind of put an outing like that together. And I do think the biggest factor in this, and I think even storyline wise, is just that I've kind of preached for the Flames in the past that like they have been a team that kind of has this no quit effort, and they're while they're not going to outskill you, you're going to find games that they outwork you. And tonight was just like, for as I said earlier, for a team that is in a playoff hunt and is in a really important time of the season, for them to roll over and play dead is a really big factor that kind of led to tonight's outcome.
And I didn't mention it earlier, but the Leafs are also in a very important stretch of the season because despite their recent struggles, the division is still very much up for grabs. The Panthers, after beating the Leafs on Thursday, decided that they just wanted to take a nap this weekend and lost in regulation to both the Habs and Islanders. Now, I know the Habs are in the thick of a playoff race too by some stroke of a miracle, but the Islanders? That's not a game that you should drop. So now the Leafs and Lightning, they're tied with the Lightning still. They're still third in the division, but they're also 2 points back of first place with a game in hand. The Leafs and Lightning both have a game in hand on the Panthers. So if the Leafs and Lightning won that game in hand, we would currently have a 3-way tie for first in the division because the Atlantic never ceases to be the bane of my existence. Just once, I want the Leafs to show up and just take a stranglehold of this division because they're capable of doing it, but they refuse. So with that being said, if there's no other questions, I guess, Matt, I'll leave you with this one. The Flames, you got, 15, 16, 17 games left in the season. I know you're on Team Tank, but in terms of building blocks that you can work on for next season, what do you want to see from this Flames team, regardless of if they make the playoffs or not, to give you some semblance of confidence going into next year?
You know what? I think I'm at the point where I've seen all I need to see from this team. I think maybe another step in oh my God, I was about to say Jacob Pelget's game. Another step in Matt Coronado's game, as well as Connor Zari's game. I think those are the two kind of biggest areas I would like to see a little bit, not necessarily improvement, but just kind of continuing this trajectory that they've made a pretty good I wouldn't call it a rookie season, or I guess Coronado would be, but they've made some really big advancements throughout the season, and they are showing this kind of streakiness. So in terms of kind of developing the younger talent, of course, I didn't include Dustin Wolf's name in there because I don't really know if you can ask for much more from him.
Yeah.
But I would say probably the younger kind of core that you want to build a foundation around. I would want to see a just continuous advancements and stepping stones into becoming a more fleshed out player. And I think you could also probably wrangle in the likes of Joel Farabee and Morgan Frost. I don't necessarily know if they've really found their stride in Calgary yet. And again, it's tough to kind of get adjusted to a completely new system and a new team that plays a whole different kind of play style. So I would say the rest of the season, again, playoff or no playoff, I do want to see improvements for, as I said, the younger core, the fundamentals that I would like to see the Flames build around in the coming years and kind of prove that they do have the talent and key components to put together a relatively competent team in the years to come.
I will say, this is just an aside, but Joel Farabee, I'm actually more mad at the NHL for this, but the first game against Toronto, I was in the building, and my buddies and I were like, okay, we gotta build a parlay for this. So what did we do? I said, there will be a goal in the first 9 minutes of the game, because that was an option for some reason, and Farabee will score the first goal of the game. And he did in the first 9 minutes, and we were on pace to cash out for like $300. And the goal got called back on the most BS goalie interference I've ever seen in my life. So I was really mad at that. But love Joel Farabee. I do love that trade for Calgary. I think getting two guys that fit their contention window, like when these guys are hitting their primes, Calgary, I think the goal should be to start building towards that true playoff contender, true like competing for the division again when the new arena is built in a few years. So we'll see what happens there. But these guys, I think that was a great trade. Morgan Frost is someone I wanted the Leafs to trade for early in the season to fill that 3C role. So I'm glad at least Calgary gets to enjoy him. Now, Matthew in the chat saying, we'll see how tired the Leafs are with this upcoming back-to-back. Luke says, I do wonder if the fact that every team gets up for the Leafs, except the Flames, game is a tax that Toronto has to play. They seem tired a lot. Look, for Matt and for all the Calgary fans that haven't been consuming much Leafs news, which I don't blame you, because why would you? There has been a narrative going around that the Leafs are tired. That the Leafs they played so many games on the road, they've traveled so much, they're just exhausted. And that's basically been a crutch for the last number of games. The same way that I was talking about Austin Matthews' injury being a crutch for him not performing, even though he has this ice time. The Leafs have the tired excuse has been going around. And as Luke points out, I do wonder if that's a tax that Toronto's paid. Yeah, deal with it. It's the NHL. There's games every other night, and teams want to win. Deal with it. If the Leafs are seriously so tired because other teams work hard against them, I don't know what we're doing here, man. So I hope that the Leafs look good in this back-to-back. You're at home. You have another day off before Colorado comes to town. There's no excuses. You had a lead against Colorado in Colorado a few weeks ago, and you blew that game. You got to take care of business here. I know Nathan McKinnon is absolutely incredible. I know Cale Makar is absolutely incredible. I don't care. Win that game. Prove that you belong in this division race. So with that being said, that is going to be where we wrap up the show. Thank you everyone for tuning in and being active down in the chat. Again, one last reminder to hit like and subscribe to Game Over Toronto and to follow us on a podcasting platform. Make sure you go subscribe to Game Over Calgary as well. And if you're on a podcasting platform, you made it this far, make sure you drop us a review as well. You can find me on Twitter at ZachPayne41, Matt at DeMille_Matthew, or Matt, not Matthew. And you can find the Game Over Network on every social media platform as well. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time. Cheers.